Hi, everybody. Today's Monday, December 8th, 2025, and our dear friend, our brother is here. Larry Johnson is here with us. Welcome back, Larry.
Who are you talking about? Me? Okay. I will accept your accolades. Very kind of you.
Larry, let me start with the Trump's NSS, National Security Strategy, which it says something, it's so amazing that you can compare it to what it was during the Biden administration. One of the core issues was NATO, how NATO is getting, stronger. And right now you see some sort of shift in the way that the Trump administration sees the conflict in Ukraine and consequently the situation with NATO. What is your understanding of the policies of the new administration, the Trump administration? It's not quite new, but
Well,
about
this
the security strategy.
I'll put this in terms of human relationships. Uh, this is like a couple that have been together for, oh man, they've been hanging out for 70, 80 years, and one partner has just submitted a letter to the other partner basically saying, I think we should start seeing other people. And so you got the written letter saying basically, we're going to get divorced. Now, are they actually going to stop sleeping together? Are they actually going to stop seeing each other? Or are they actually going to get divorced? So, what we have with the national security strategy is the United States doing, I'd call it a 180 in terms of how they address both Russia and China as threats compared to previous editions of national security strategies, both the one that Biden put out and then in 2023, 2022, and the one that Trump put out in his first administration. Boy, Europeans are having a meltdown. We thought we were friends forever. We thought we were your number one. And again, I put the emphasis on this is what they've written it down. But it's one thing to write it down, one thing to say it. What are we going to do? Um, it appears that the Trump administration is genuine with respect to the war in Ukraine. If you watch just in the last couple of days, you've had comments both by J.D. Vance and then comments by Don Trump Jr. Boy, he was lighting Zelensky up like a Christmas tree, like the Christmas tree lighting they do in New York City, boy, full flame on. Uh, that that doesn't augur
You're
well
talking
for,
about Doha, what
yeah,
he said in
yeah,
Doha.
right, exactly. Uh, so this I I always say jokingly when they say, yeah, they put out the national security strategy. We go, we got a strategy? you know, I didn't think we could spell strategy. Um, so the core of the shift now is that it's going to be America first, and we're going to control our hemisphere. This, what the real problem with this national security strategy is it's still sort of it is not so. It's still predicated on the assumptions about a world that's coming to an end, a world that no longer that won't exist in 4 or 5 years, and that world is a world where the United States is the dominant economic power, and we can dictate to everybody else what they need to do. Um, the the United States uh, leadership role is evaporating, and the most interesting facet of this is that Europe has really dominated history for the last 400 years. Uh, even though those we live in the West, and but really the major events of the last 400 years have been dictated by Europe, whether it's the colonization of Africa, subjugation of China and India by Britain, um, the various, World War One, World War Two, these massive human conflagrations, human sacrifice on a massive scale. The power of the dollar, the rise of the dollar. Um, that's all. It's coming to an end. It is going to change. It's a change equivalent to a massive earthquake. It shakes everything. So, um, the national security strategy, in my view, it's a step in the right direction to recognize, yeah, that world's changing, but there's still denial. They still haven't fully accepted the fact that, you know what, our central position in the world is slipping away.
Yeah. I remember one of the main points, in the Biden administration, the national security strategy they published in those days, they were talking about autocracy and democracy. They are the autocracy, we are democracy, we have
Yeah,
to defeat them.
yeah.
Do you think that's still the hardcore, or is there still that the foundation of what's going on in the United States, the ideology? I see less ideology in the Trump administration, by the way, Larry. More, they understand how the world is changing in terms of the economy, the power, the production, energy, all of that. But we've seen that we haven't seen that much in the Biden administration. They were mostly focused on the ideology of the United States, which was the democracy and autocracy, and which pretty much is the same that is happening right now in the mind of Europeans today.
Well, um, what you had previously was the power of the neoconservatives, um, both carrying the idea that the United States could rule the world. We could set the terms, and the rest of the world is going to have to follow. Damn it! Coupled with an Israel-centric policy, and I mean, we're still seeing that with God, Germany in particular is just to me stunning. That Frederick Merz cozying up to Bibi Netanyahu. Um, but that again, it is a shift away with Trump. His claim to be America first, and again, it sounds great on the campaign trail, but how does that get translated into action? And the actions Trump has taken so far have actually been detrimental to America first. On the foreign policy front, he's subjugated um, America first to Israel first, and that has created a backlash in the United States. It's genuine with uh, growing opposition to that idea. Um, on the economic front, when he moved out to impose tariffs again, trying to uh, and I agree with his broader stated objective that you got to reshore the industrial base of the United States instead of allowing corporations, not so much allowing corporations, but instead of this system that we've put in place where corporations are incentivized to create returns for their shareholders, that they will take a manufacturing plant, say in Waterloo, Iowa, and they'll move it to Mexico. And when they do that, those Americans who were working at that factory now are unemployed. So I understand Trump wanting to bring it back to the United States so that we're not having to rely upon uh, China or Russia or Japan for steel production. That we're doing it ourselves, so that there's certain key technologies for industrial production that we keep here. Um, but Trump's tariffs approach is not producing that result necessarily, and in fact, it's exposing the weakness of the American economy and the limits of our influence now. I mean, I've mentioned this commercial from the 1970s, and it was an investment commercial. There was a company called E.F. Hutton, and they were like, you know, trying to build themselves a business as, you know, bring us your money and we'll help you invest it and you grow rich. Anyway, the commercial went like this. It'd be all these people talking, a big room full, everybody's talking, and they focus in on these two people having a conversation. It'd be either two men, two women, or a man and a woman. And one would say, well, E.F. Hutton says, and everybody would stop talking and they'd go, huh? What? What are they? So that used to be the U.S. and, you know, how whenever we talked, everybody else would stop talking. They'd look, what are they saying? What are those Americans doing? Now, some countries are treating America like the crazy uncle that you invite for a holiday dinner. You know, it's just like, oh, there he is. Yeah, we'll put him at another table. Just leave us alone. India, China in particular, Russia, Iran, Vietnam, all these countries now, even Brazil, they're looking to step outside of the U.S. net of control. They'd still like to have relationships with the United States, but they're tired of being bullied, and that's become, you know, the U.S. policy, bullying. And yeah, it's one thing to bully if you've got the actual control that people can't fight back, but U.S. is discovering that they can fight back. I mean, look at the rhetoric with respect to like India. Yeah, we're going to cut you. We're going to hurt Russia. We're not going to let India buy any more oil from Russia. We're going to sanction you. What did India do? they're still buying the oil. Didn't stop. China didn't stop, despite Western claims that they did. It's just not true. So it's the end of American dominance. America is not going to go away, but it's going to have to adapt to a new role of, you know what, maybe we ought to try to just get along with people instead of invading them. You know, like the current kabuki dance with Venezuela is, you know, maybe sort of an epitaph for the American century. The end of the American hegemony will be demonstrated by what's our, you know, we keep threatening Venezuela, but pretty problematic. And we got a precursor of that, you know, sort of a shadowing of what was going to come with what happened in the Red Sea. You know, I did this goes off a little bit on a tangent, but I did a debate with Grok and with DeepSeek. And the Grok debate was really interesting, because about what happened in the Red Sea. Good God, you'd think you were talking to a neoconservative crazy person, and Grok.
I did.
Yeah. Oh no, the United States didn't lose. Oh boy, yeah, we really showed those Houthis. And I'd go back and say, wait. The Houthis shut down all maritime traffic to Israel, and it's still shut down, correct? Well, yeah, but it's like, okay, because it all started when I was asking about the view of the Russian military. Oh, Russia's really not that strong because the United States has got 11 carriers. Oh, yeah. How did that power from an aircraft carrier prove to be in the Red Sea? Huh? Did we force the Houthis to their knees? No. Did we get the Red Sea back open? No. Were we scared to death that they were going to sink one of our carriers with one of the what were described as hypersonic missiles? Bet your ass they were terrified. So the entire model that you know, the United States has structured this defense capability predicated on an aircraft carrier that, frankly, that's like saying, yeah, we've got a mobile cavalry. Oh, you mean tanks? No, we got horses. yeah, they don't hold up well against the machine gun. That's where we are. We're at a transitionary period. Sorry for the long rant.
Yeah, you mentioned DeepSeek, Larry. I found it DeepSeek somehow different from Grok and ChatGPT, but
Not
uh,
much. They've belittled it.
not much exactly. That's not much. That was amazing. That was somehow surprising to me that how these engines are somehow coordinating with each other.
Well, it's not so much that the engines are coordinating; it's the way the algorithms are written.
Mm.
So, um, if let's say
But
you've got
you have to believe that the algorithm in China should be somehow different from Grok, for
well,
example.
let's say that you've got 4 baskets of spices. You got a basket of black pepper. You got a basket of salt. You got a basket of red chilies. Let's just go with 3. If you sample, when your algorithm says go out and collect this information, if you're collecting primarily from the red chili basket, only taking a pinch from the salt basket, and taking nothing from the black pepper basket, are you going to be surprised when it tests like red chilies? So that's exactly what's going on. What they do is, I initially had assumed and hoped that these engines were going out and they were actually able to read and process through this dramatic power that they have what's written in Russia, what's written in China, what's written in Iran, as well as what's written in Western media, and then collect all of that so that you have a fuller picture. But that's not what they're doing. Um, I give you an example. On Sunday, the financial was it no Saturday, excuse me, Saturday, the Financial Times published this propaganda piece about how bad the Russian economy is, and it was done by this woman, Alina Rebekova, I think is her name. She's from Latvia, and she's a recognized economist. But boy, she's just saying some crazy stuff. But it gets out there, so that gets printed, and then there was a piece put out by Ukraine that was mirroring what she was saying. Okay, so those 2 pieces are out there. So if you ask Grok or DeepSeek or anybody, hey, how's the Russian economy doing? They're going to hit on those articles and they'll bring them forward. And because the Western media does not allow competing narratives, does not allow somebody the refutations like what I wrote, the search engine, the AI engines don't pick that up. So then they regurgitate this propaganda view, skewing the system. So uh, that's what makes AI so dangerous because it does just become another megaphone for repeating Western propaganda.
Yeah. Larry, today there is a meeting in the United Kingdom. All these Europeans are coming together to talk about the situation in Ukraine. It seems that the main issue to be discussed is the Russian assets, and they want to use the Russian assets to that they're talking about reparations loans to giving that to Ukraine. What was amazing and somehow surprising to me that Poland was not invited to the meeting.
Yeah, that's just yeah. I mean, it basically it's Germany, France, the UK, and Zelensky.
Exactly. This is
Yeah.
the how do you think that Europe is somehow do they really understand that the Trump administration is moving away from Ukraine? Because you look at what his son said in Doha, and he was mentioning that Donald Trump is not interested anymore in Ukraine. And the United States is just an international security strategy. They're talking about putting all the burden on the shoulders of Europeans if they want to continue the war.
Yeah.
What is the main goal on the part of Europeans today? Is that the continuation of the conflict? Is that something to the to help the future of Ukraine? Maybe cooperating with Russians, the possibility of cooperation between the two parties. Are they capable of getting back or somehow backing down and cooperate with Russia in order to help Ukraine?
Uh, Probably not. At least with this current group of leaders. it's like all four, Zelensky, Merz, Starmer, Macron, they've fallen into a deep well. The well is dry at the bottom. And they're looking up trying to figure out, how the hell do we get out of here? And there really is no road out. The notion that, okay, well, we're just going to seize and start spending Russia's $300 billion. You got Belgium saying, no, 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 no. Wait a second, you can't do that, because if they do that, they try to do that, Belgium is on the hook, economically. They have signed a treaty agreement with Russia. Under that treaty agreement, this kind of action would precipitate a mediation effort, and based upon international law and everything, Belgium would lose, and then there'd be assets seized by Russia. The Russians have made it clear that there are a number of European banks and European companies that have assets in Russia. Now, Russia has left them alone up to this point. But Russia's made clear, if you guys go this way, that's going to be like triggering a nuclear strike, and so Russia will hit back with everything. What's fascinating, I've learned in the last couple of days, is that during World War II, the Nazi Germany had assets that were held in Belgium under a similar sort of arrangement, and the West never touched those. They left them alone during World War II, and I guarantee you what was going on in World War II was a lot more intense than what's happening now. So this just shows this is part of a panicked reaction. Despite all the happy talk that, oh, Ukraine's winning, Russia's losing, Russia's economy's collapsing, all that nonsense, they deep down know that they're in trouble. And they're trying to figure out, how do we escape? And, it's the Titanic is sinking and it's time to head for the lifeboats, but there aren't enough lifeboats.
You mentioned with the current European leaders that would be somehow impossible to work with Russians, but how long does it take for Europe to understand that? Because looking at the United States today and comparing to what it was before Donald Trump coming to power, we see some sort of sea change in the way that they see Russia. They talk with Russia. Europe is not there anymore.
Well, let's be
Is
clear
that ideological, Larry? Is that ideological? Is that something that they would benefit in a long run? I'm talking about the leadership. I'm not talking about European people.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was going to point out. It is this current crop of leaders in Europe, for the most part, are so out of touch with reality and dealing with fantasies that the chances of a reconciliation or to talking to the Russian, both Putin and the various diplomats, is out of the question. You got Urban and then Fico, they're sane and rational, but as we saw the other day with the EU, with both von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas, they're talking about imposing more sanctions on on Russia, and stopping, making sure we don't want to buy any more of their nasty, inexpensive oil and gas. We want to pay higher prices. You're going, you guys are crazy. I mean, yeah, really, it's just being that out of touch with reality is where they're at. So there's going to have to be a political shakeup on the European side. I think there is, as you intimated, a majority of Europeans. We don't want to go to war with Russia. That would be insane. So what we're looking at is continued economic and political chaos in Europe.
Yeah. Here is, Larry, what Donald Trump said about Zelensky.
Russia-Ukraine talks after last week's negotiations.
So we've been speaking to President Putin, and we've been speaking to Ukrainian leaders, including Zelensky, President Zelensky. And I have to say that I'm a little bit disappointed that President Zelensky hasn't yet read the proposal. That was as of a few hours ago. His people love it, but he hasn't. Russia's fine with it. Russia, I guess, would rather have the whole country when you think of it. But Russia is, I believe, fine with it. But I'm not sure that Zelensky's fine with it. His people love it, but he hasn't read it. So someday you'll explain that one to me, Jeff.
Yeah. Larry, he says Zelensky hasn't read it, but what is that? It's 28 points. It's not that much reading.
Well, I think what Trump is signaling there, the way he's going to frame this, is the agreement that Russia will accept is that they are the legal rulers over Crimea, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, and Luhansk. And the way Trump will frame it is, we got Russia to agree not to take all of Ukraine. Instead, we got them to just accept these 5 territories. Now that'll be, I think, how he'll try to sell it. Ukraine, for its part, won't accept that, but Ukraine's not going to have a, they're not going to have a say. It's like, you're hosting a buffet dinner. Everybody's supposed to bring something to eat. Ukraine does not only not bringing anything to eat, they don't have anything, and they don't have any money to buy something to bring. They're going to be out. They are losing militarily, and the economy is in just shambles. So, we're watching it die. Now, will that take a month, 3 months, 6 months? Anybody that's worked in the medical field will know that there are people that they get a diagnosis with a fatal disease, whether it's cancer, and they're given, you got so much time to live, and sometimes they die the next day. Other times they live for, 4 or 5 more years than predicted. Who knows? But they got the disease, and the death is certain. And that's what's certain about Ukraine. There is absolutely no way that Ukraine survives, or let me put it this way: how much of Ukraine as a political and economic entity survives depends on whether or not it finally comes to its senses and tries and negotiates with Russia on Russia's terms. Russia, people say, well, that's not how negotiations work. Each side is to have a say. No, not when you're beating the hell out of the other, which is exactly what's taking place. And the speed over the last week of the Russian advance is, I think, really shocked many in the West, which again is why we're starting to see this, sudden flood of propaganda. And now they're focused on, how bad the Russian economy is doing. And the reason they're pushing those stories is that, see, if we just wait a little bit longer, they're going to collapse and we'll win. So keep in there. Now, all you're doing now is putting more money into a lost cause.
Donald Trump said that his people he's talking about Zelensky's people. His people like the plan. He's trying to draw a line between Zelensky, the people who are working with Zelensky, and Zelensky himself. Who are these people that he's talking about? He's talking about Umarov? I don't know.
I think these are imaginary people that live in his mind. Maybe he's talking about Klitschko. Maybe he's talking about Zaluzhny. The alternatives.
Sersky definitely not there.
No.
He's so.
What I think what's going on in part is the United States the intelligence community is now working behind the scenes to try to figure out, okay, who's the next acceptable Ukrainian we can put in an office. Remember the phone call that was intercepted between Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Piat, the U.S. ambassador in Ukraine. And, we were sitting there deciding, no, What about this guy? No, he's a jerk. No, he's a dummy. Oh, we want this guy. We can manipulate the hell. That's what's going on behind the
There
scenes.
is a lot going on in
Yeah.
that sense.
Yeah, I guarantee you that that's what's going on behind the scenes right now. And so when Trump says, "Oh yeah, the others like it," that's the others that we're talking to. But I don't think any of those are in the inner circle of Zelensky. Or you may find one formerly in the inner circle of Zelensky who has a keen desire to save their ass and are going to look to cut a deal with the West so that they survive and keep their money, keep all the money that they've stolen in the process.
Yeah, but this time around, Larry, you remember what Victoria Nuland said in that phone call, said F Europeans.
Yeah.
But today is not that way. Europeans are much more, they have a lot of leverage in Ukraine, more than the United States has.
What do you mean by they have more leverage?
Because it seems to me that specifically Germany, the United Kingdom, and France, they have a lot. You look at their forces in Odessa, for example, the intelligence they're receiving from Ukrainians, how connected they are to the Zelensky administration. You don't see that happening between the Trump administration and the Zelensky administration. That's different.
Outwardly, rhetorically from Trump, no. But I wouldn't rule out the continued support of the CIA through Budanov to Ukraine. We haven't given up completely. If if Trump was really serious about bringing this to an end, it just simply matters telling Ukraine, okay, hey, no more money, no more intelligence, and I'm ordering the CIA to withdraw its personnel. That would mark a very, very quick end for Ukraine. Ukraine does not have the wherewithal, nor does Europe. Europe doesn't have the money. Europe doesn't have the industrial capability. All Europe has are a bunch of words.
But after all, we know that Trump hates to be on the losing part, on the losing side.
Yeah.
That's why every time he's talking about the war in Ukraine, he says it's Biden's war, it's not mine. That's why it seems to me that's the only reason, and one of the main reasons, that he's still in the conflict. He's still involved in the conflict in Ukraine, because somehow the administration, the establishment told him if he leaves Ukraine, all the defeat would be blamed on Donald Trump, not anyone else in Europe.
Donald Trump's a bad foster parent. Foster parents, they take in kids who were born to other mothers and fathers. And so now they become the surrogate mother or father. And so I say he's a bad foster parent. You've got this kid living with you. You have to feed it, clothe it, educate it, support it. And every day you get up and say, "Oh, this isn't my kid. This kid belongs to somebody else. This isn't my war. This is Joe Biden's war." Well, you can say that, but the kid's living with you. It's not living with them.
Exactly.
So, you can pretend all day long that this belongs to Joe Biden. Does not change the fact that this baby's living with you now, and it's yours. And so that's one dilemma that confronts Trump. He's sort of still in denial, but we're starting to see the movement. Kellogg's being set aside. Don Jr. is speaking out at the Doha meeting. J.D. Vance has been very tough on the Europeans again. So I think the Trump administration is starting to reposition itself, and I think one thing that may be driving that is they are looking at the polls, and they recognize that Trump's current strategy is hurting him, not helping him.
Yeah. Here is what Don Jr. said in Doha, Larry.
I was this summer with my beautiful girlfriend Bettina in Monaco, and we were driving around, and on an average day, 50% of the supercars, the Bugattis, the Ferraris, the this, all had Ukrainian plates. Do we think that was actually earned in Ukraine? I'd been to Ukraine 20 years ago. It wasn't like there was a plethora of wealth there. And yet you see the number 2 there getting arrested for stealing hundreds of millions of dollars. You hear all the rumors about what's going on. When I see every license plate on a supercar in Monaco being Bugattis, the rich fled. They let what they believed to be the peasant class fight these wars. And there was no incentive to stop, because as long as the money train was coming and they were stealing it and no one was auditing anything, the leaders, the decision makers, there was no reason for them to ever come to peace. No different than Putin. It wasn't the son of oligarchs that were fighting.
I think it shows how every war is, Larry, every war is corrupt, and how these people around the war who are advocating for more, the continuation of the war, are benefiting from what's going on, from this misery, that is happening in Ukraine.
Hey, war is a great financial opportunity. Fortunes are made. And as long as you're not the one on the receiving end of the violence, boy, it's a great thing. So, this by Trump Jr., this is a signal. I don't, he's not going to go out and say that without having talked to his dad about it. So they are positioning to jettison Zelensky. And Zelensky's trying to figure out if he can cut a deal and the Europeans can save him. But, the Europeans don't have the military power. As I think we mentioned on the Friday show, or maybe a week ago, that the German army, the French army, and the British army combined are less than 500,000. And yet, and then one of the 28-point proposal they were pushing is to make the Ukrainian army 800,000. And the Ukrainians got like 19 million people left in the country. They don't have the manpower resources. So this is all a lot of desperate posturing, I'd call it. Before reality is gonna sink in here one of these days, and they'll recognize there's nothing they could do. It's it's not like if simply they ramped up production of an air defense system in the West, they could deliver that in quantity to Ukraine, everything would be okay. It's not okay. They simply refuse to accept the fact that Russia's mobilized now upwards of 1.5 million men. Well, not mobilized. They've built the army up through conscription, through recruitment, as well as through partial mobilization. And that Ukraine simply doesn't have the manpower to replace, to counter that. Even if you go with the conventional notion that a defending force has an advantage over an attacking force must have 3 to 4 times the number of soldiers as the defending force. Well, we're absolutely past that ratio now. Russia, Russia is probably got 7 times to 8 times the manpower that Ukraine does.
Larry, the other point that Don Jr. said in Doha, that the case of Ukraine is not even in the 10 priorities of the people, American people.
Yeah.
Even what I don't know if it has ever been one of the priorities for the American people who vote for the people who are voting for Democrat or Republican. Did they ever had Ukraine as their priority? Did they ever have Ukraine?
Oh yeah, back in February, March, April of 2022, early on, sure. I mean, people had Ukrainian flags in their front yards. Members of Congress wearing Ukrainian flags on their lapels. The media was constantly playing up. Now, in terms of reports about what's going on in Ukraine, nothing. If we don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. They've turned it they've turned it into Fight Club. What's the first rule of Fight Club? You don't talk about Fight Club. And the second rule, you don't talk about Fight Club. And so that's what it's become. We don't talk about the war in Ukraine. Instead, we talk about the corruption. And that's where that shift in the narrative tells me that the Trump administration is trying to figure out an escape hatch. And by dumping it on the Europeans, they're just saying, hey, this, the rationale would be, well, this is a European conflict. Why should we be in the middle of it? We'll help them. We'll sell them whatever weapons they want. And again, we come back, we make money. It's all about the money. Money, 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 money.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw the panel in Doha. They had, Trita Parsi together with Javad Zarif, the former foreign minister and the former vice president of Iran, and together with a European lady. I don't remember her name, but she said that the first priority of Europe today is Ukraine. And they're so much disappointed with the position of the United States today in Ukraine. Why? Who puts Ukraine the first? What is the first priority for Europe? What is, how the conflict in Ukraine is a priority to Europe? Is that gonna, if they continue the conflict, is that gonna making their position stronger, or is that going to weaken their position? Does it have anything to do with the economy of Europe? Does it have anything to do with the military power of Europe? How it became the priority of Europe?
It's completely irrational. It goes back to the plan of the West was to use Ukraine as a diving board, a platform that you can bounce off of to take out Russia. I think the long-term objective has always been to secure control of Russia's great wealth and natural resources. That's what was going on in the 1990s as the Russian economy imploded, and just a horror story broke out among the Russians. Whereas the Europeans, they were doing pretty good. There were European oligarchs, the American oligarchs who were teaming up with Russian oligarchs, most of them Jewish. I mean, let's be clear about this. You get into this Zionist nonsense, but that played a clear role. And then when Putin, takes over, basically shoved into office as prime minister in August of 1999, August 9th to be precise. And then in December, they say, you're president as well. That started the Putin era. So from 2000, from January 1st on, that was the beginning of the Putin era. And I think it was July of 2001 that Putin finally had that meeting with all the Russian oligarchs and basically said, hey, you're going to stop raping our country and you're going to stop surrendering our country to these foreigners. So that was the beginning of the tensions and frictions over the economy and the money with the European wealthy. And that also marked a significant turnaround of the Russian economy. That was the start of the rebuilding process. I talked to Matt Taibbi the other day because he lived in Russia back then, and he was describing how, he'd be walking down the street, Tverskaya Street in Moscow, the Tverskaya Ulitsa. There'd be bodies laying out on the street, dead, just dead bodies. And it wasn't just homeless people sleeping. So that the entire focus of Russia has been to fend off this European effort to rape it. And Russia, the Europeans haven't come to grips with that yet. They still think they've got a chance to wrest control of Russia from Vladimir Putin and to put the European elite in charge. Ain't gonna happen. I posted on my at Sonar 21 last night because this notion that they still seem to think they have a chance to defeat Russia. I used that clip from the movie Dumb and Dumber, where this idiot character played by Jim Carrey is talking to this beautiful woman and is saying, basically, what are my chances with a relationship? And the woman goes, not good. And he goes, would you say it's 1 in 100? And she goes, it's more like 1 in a million. And you see Carrie's face go, then I've still got a chance. Okay. That's Europe. They're trying to make a 1 in a million bet come pay off. But you step back and look at them and say, how financially strong are they? I suspected the truth of what I'm going to say, but I was able to confirm it. Out of all the industrial nations in the world, everyone that produces and manufactures goods, and we're talking the largest economies in the world, the one with the lowest debt to GDP ratio, which means they're not borrowing a lot of money, they're not indebted up to their ass, is Russia. Meanwhile, France, Germany, the UK, their debt is rising rapidly, and their industrial base is shrinking. How, the economic fundamentals are all completely off. And yet they spend all the time talking about how bad the economy is in Russia. And the Russian economy's doing okay. Yeah, this year it's only growing at 0.6% according to Western experts. Yeah, and why is that? The reason for that is when the inflation that was triggered by Russia ramping up its war production. So that the economy is growing at like 4.7% last year. Elvira Nabiullina, the central banker, with Putin's permission or Putin's support, imposed raised interest rates dramatically to try to cool off the Russian economy. And what's fascinating out of this is that the people were hollering about, oh, this is hurting the economy. And it did. It shrunk the economic growth, deliberately slowed it down. Well, the reason for that is the Russian leadership remembers in the 1990s, there were 2 periods of hyperinflation that just devastated people. And back then, people couldn't find a job. You had credentialed professionals, even laborers from factories. They couldn't find a job. People that did have a job kept going to their job, but weren't getting paid. And then we're talking school teachers, we're talking military personnel, we're talking government. At least they had a job. They had something to go to on the promise that they may eventually get paid. Well, that's not Russia today at all. In fact, and there's this crazy woman that was interviewed that I mentioned earlier, Elena, the Latvian economist. She was saying, oh, yeah, the Russian economy is bad because they don't have enough workers. Their unemployment rate is 2.3%. Wow. In other words, there are plenty of jobs. There's just not enough people to do the jobs. Oh, yeah, that's bad. Yeah, we'd rather be in a position where there were no jobs and people were lined up wanting a job. Yeah, that'd be better. You want to grab her and say, shut up. Or then this, and wages grew 20%. So let me get this straight. You're telling me that inflation is increasing, and yet people's wages are going up. So basically, they have more money to spend. So the inflationary impact on a family is minimal. Yet Russia recognizes it's a problem, and it's taking corrective steps. What's the West doing? Yeah, our economies are dependent on inexpensive oil and gas. So therefore, we're going to cut ourselves off from the source of inexpensive oil and gas, and we're going to go buy more expensive oil and gas, which means the prices are going to go up dramatically, except our factories are leaving and going to places like the United States and other places. That is not a strategy for victory. That's
Mm.
just insane. So, I mean, you're watching this, you know, I don't know if when you've read history in the past with watching why nations make certain decisions, and with the benefit of time passing, you can look back and say, boy, that was crazy. What were they thinking? We're in one of those epics right now that the decisions being made in the West are irrational.
Yeah. Larry, here is what Turkey Al Faisal, the the former Saudi intelligence chief, said about Israel. He says that Israel is the greater threat to the region, to the stability of the region, is Israel, is not Iran. I remember before the conflict before October the 7th, they were the people, or the leadership in Saudi Arabia, they were thinking that Iran is one of the main, problems in the
Hmm.
region. And today, the tone has totally changed. You look at Doha and the nature and the tones of the talks that were happening. In
Right.
you feel that you see that there is something big going on there.
Yeah.
And
Well,
what is your understanding of Israel today, of the state of Israel, and what has happened during the war, the genocide in Gaza? And it seems that that has totally changed the mindset of the people, the leadership in the Middle East toward Israel.
well, let's call it national unity in Israel has been, I think, destroyed. Um, while there is consensus, I think general consensus among a majority of Israelis that they don't want a Palestinian state and they want to destroy the Palestinians. Uh, the the national pride that once was common for most Israelis, almost an arrogance. Uh, there's severe divisions. You even saw now that uh, Netanyahu has taken some steps to try to clamp down and punish one sector of settlers. So Israel is facing, significant political division in terms of with their own domestic policies. Um, the economy in Israel it's being kept afloat by the foreign governments, in the United States in particular, sending money. On its own, it's been weakened significantly. So this is it's continued chaos, and I maintain that Israel, when they continue to try to do things militarily, they're just putting increasing strains on themselves. And I want to go back and reiterate a point I brought up last week, that when you look at the territory that of Gaza, it's basically 350 square kilometers. The Israelis got it surrounded on all sides. They've mobilized 300,000 soldiers, and yet they've been unable to defeat Hamas in just that area. And then at the same time, they've launched military operations in Lebanon and in Syria. You compare just this last in November alone, Russia captured territory that's twice the size of Gaza. With they didn't have 300,000 troops in one small area. They were spread out along a 1,000-plus-mile line of contact. So um, Israel continues to labor under the mythology that they can fight their way out of this. They can kill enough people. They can flex enough military muscle that they ultimately will prevail. And I maintain that it's just the opposite. They continue to damage themselves. They've now isolated themselves. And as the Saudis, Trump is always betting that he could get the Abraham Accords, which was, it was a smart idea that if you get all of these Gulfi Arabs to sign on to, yeah, we're going to recognize Israel and bring it into sort of not treated as a pariah, then that was a path forward to peace. But that boat's now left. It ain't coming back.
Just I forgot to bring something up to you. I don't know if you saw Donald Trump receiving the Peace Prize, the very first Peace Prize of FIFA.
Yeah, I thought, please, God, man,
Look at the clip. It's just amazing.
I mean, that guy, the president of FIFA, boy, talk about kissing ass. My God, it was so bad. He wanted to say, "Hey, you two, get a room, okay? You shouldn't be displaying this kind of public affection towards one another. Go get into a bedroom."
Yeah.
Mr. President, this is your prize. This is your Peace Prize. There is also a beautiful medal for you that you can wear everywhere you want to go.
Right now.
Okay, please welcome the very first winner of the FIFA Peace Prize, the 45th and 47th President of the United States of America, Mr. Donald J. Trump. Please.
Thank you very much. This is truly one of the great honors of my life. And beyond awards, John and I were discussing this. We saved millions and millions of lives. The Congo, as an example, over 10 million people killed, and it was heading for another 10 million very quickly. And it just, the fact that we could do that, India, Pakistan, so many different wars that we're able to end, in some cases a little bit before they started, just right before they.
Larry.
Yeah, let me put an image in everybody's mind that they want to scrub their brain. So Donald Trump's naked in the shower wearing his Peace Prize. Okay, I mean, just God Almighty, this is so bizarre. But the level of insecurity on display, quite remarkable. And there he is, Mr. Roberts.
Hello, Larry.
How's it
Hello,
going, Paul?
Nima. Great.
Welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
Paul, did you see that FIFA they have invented a new prize? They call it Peace Prize to give it to Donald Trump. It's unbelievable. Yeah, we were watching that. Paul, before that clip, we were talking about how, because we know, you remember that last time we talked, we were talking about, you said that Israel is winning in the Middle East. Your take is that Israel has weakened, the acts of resistance, and they're winning. Looking at Doha, what has happened in Doha, and we had the head of intelligence, Saudi intelligence, saying that Israel is the biggest threat to the Middle East. And
I'm glad they finally realized that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think, Paul, after all, do you see Israel winning?
Look, I'm not an expert on all of that. I didn't need to know everything because for a decade or longer, I was at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and my colleagues were Henry Kissinger, Brzezinski, James R. Schlesinger, Admiral Murrah. So I had my own AI before AI existed. And I was mainly interested in economic things, all the offshoring, the loss of jobs, the destruction of middle-class jobs, the destruction of the ladders of upward mobility, the destruction of the tax base of overcommitted cities and democratic regimes. And so I was focused on that. And if I needed to do anything, I would see what my colleagues had to say, because I figured they knew more than I did and had been part of this for years and years. And Schlesinger had been one of my former professors. So I don't really know, but what I see in the Middle East is that we spent 20 years destroying Arab countries that Israel regarded as constraints on Greater Israel. And our destruction of so many Arab and Muslim countries has flooded the Western world with refugees. We're overrun with people that we drove out of their own country with bombs and everything else. And so is Europe. And it's really a question, have we destroyed ourselves eventually by simply displacing white ethnic populations? So I would say that Israel has removed all possible opponents other than Iran. And Iran, of course, is not Arabic. So I would have to say, because we destroyed Israel's enemies under the guise of a war on terror, they were able to use American money and lives and weapons for 2 decades or longer to get rid of constraints on Israeli expansion. And now we have Israel in southern Syria. They say they're there to stay. We have Israel in Lebanon. Hezbollah has been greatly weakened because Syria has been lost, and the flow of weapons into Hezbollah or has to be restrained, and money. And so I would say I don't know what's in the way of Israel, and no one has done anything about what they're doing in Gaza. Everyone's afraid to oppose them. It's hard to imagine many countries getting away with what Israel gets away with. So as long as that happens, what's the constraint on them? Who's constraining them? There's nobody. The Russians don't. Putin doesn't. Nobody constrains them. There are no Arabs left that I know of. The Arab states that were in Libya and Iraq and Syria, they're gone. So anyhow, I don't really know, but that's just the impression I get. While we still have Larry, I'd like to ask him a question, if he doesn't mind.
Sure.
I want to know, Larry, what the importance is of the annual national security strategy. Is it an important document? Does it have authority? I know it came from Trump, but who usually prepares that? And what does it mean? Does this have any force behind it? Because if it does, it seems to me Trump has really achieved a big, important thing, and he's put the United States and the world on a different course, and that should be recognized. He should get credit for that. So I wanted to know, I figured you would know whether this is an important document or just something that people do.
Well, yeah. In fact, Neiman and I were talking about that at the very beginning of our interview. It is. I'm not sure who has the lead on drafting it. I would think that would come, probably through the National Intelligence Council. That they used to have the lead, I think, on drafting that. And when it's drafted, of course, you get the Defense Intelligence Agency weighs in, and State Department INR weighs in. So you get all the different elements of the intelligence community come in, and then it's also with some policy input. I think this one had a lot of input from Elbridge Colby, who is the Deputy Secretary of Defense, or Deputy Secretary of War now. He's the grandson of William Colby, who was director of the CIA that gave up the family jewels in 1976, 78. It's really a symbolic document. It always, I jokingly refer to it as It's one of the few instances in which the United States government can actually spell strategy, but in terms of actually having a strategy that they implement, you find it many times at odds. So it's not a document that actually dictates policy. It has the ability to say, okay, this is where our priorities are. And I used the analogy early on. This is, this is like a couple that've been together for 70 years. And now the United States, who's the one partner in this, has come and told the other partner, Europe, you know what? I think we need to start seeing other people. It's sort of the start of a divorce, but I was born and raised in Missouri, so you got to show me first that is this just words on paper, or is it going to be accompanied by action? And
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
yeah, and so when you go back and look at the strategy that Trump put in paper in 2017, and the strategy that Biden put in place in 23, they usually end up being words on paper that don't actually translate into substantive policy. So,
one follow-up question. It looks to me to be a document that's sort of a repudiation of the Wolfowitz doctrine of American hegemony.
yes.
So how in the world did that get out of the government? I would have thought the neocons were still very much present in American foreign policy circles, and certainly in the War Department and the State Department. And I was wondering how did Colby get that out, and did he put himself at some kind of career risk and taking on the hegemony doctrine by doing that?
I learned from one of my first supervisors at State Department taught me a very important lesson, that when you're talking about a particular policy, and even if there's going to be a policy change, the key is you become the drafter. You draft the document, because if you're the one who's actually written the key document that everybody's working from, then you can actually control the policy. So I think that's what Colby actually got control of the process to be the leading voice. And you know how the bureaucracy works. It's a sort of the corollary to the golden rule. Those with the gold get to make the rules. Those with the pen who are writing the document, they get to make the rules sort of too. Now, you're absolutely correct that the new strategy outlined in this document is, oh my God, we're divorcing Europe, and the neocon community is up in arms. The Europeans are having a meltdown, but let's see what they actually do. Is there going to be actual substance behind this, or is this just going to turn out to be another government document produced that has great rhetorical flourishes but means nothing?
That's what I wanted to know. Yeah.
So with that, I'm going to bow out and leave you guys to have the conversation. I mean, people line up.
Wait a minute. It does seem, though, that it seems to me encouraging now for the negotiations between Putin and Trump, because it does say that we are avoiding, we are giving up this doctrine of hegemony, and we want to reconcile Russia with the West. So this seems to me to imply hope for these negotiations for the first time.
Yeah.
You agree with that? I mean,
yeah. Well, Russia's successes on the battlefield are bringing this about, and at least the Trump folks now recognize, okay, this party's over. We need to position ourselves. Yeah, that's why you saw Don Jr. in Doha. Man, he got out the stick and was just beating Zelensky up, one side down the other, even though Zelensky wasn't there personally. There was no doubt that the Trump administration no longer thinks Vladimir Zelensky is a partner worth sticking with. So, hey, you guys have a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you very much.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
How's it going, Paul?
Great.
Paul, what is important in your opinion in this new document, this national security strategy? You remember during the Biden administration, they were talking about autocracy and democracies. And right now, the tone, as you've mentioned, has totally somehow changed. And how is that going to be helpful if they decide to implement what they're talking about in this document?
It gets us off the path to nuclear war. You know, you can't stay forever in conflict with a military power like Russia and continue provoking and attacking and causing all kinds of difficulties without the situation finally getting out of hand. And it's like I said in my article this morning, if we can take this document seriously, then the Union of Atomic Scientists can move the hand on the doomsday clock, which I think is like a second or two to doomsday. They can move it back a couple of hours. And so this would be a huge achievement. If we can get off of this path to nuclear war that we've been on ever since the Wolfowitz Doctrine was declared. And so by abandoning this war-prone document of hegemony or policy of hegemony, we've changed the course of the world. And Trump is emphasizing competitiveness, economic competitiveness between nations, and giving up this claim that we can invade everybody in order to bring democracy. And we can bomb countries to bring democracy and overthrow countries to bring democracy. So this is an abandonment of the neoconservative policy that has been in place since, I think, 1991. So I see that as a huge change, if it means anything. That's why I wanted to question Larry, because he pays more attention to that, and it's more in line with his experience. Like I say, I didn't have to know. I had colleagues I could ask. And I see other very important things in there. He rejects the whole DEI process. He says if we don't have merit-based appointments and jobs, will be bypassed by countries that do. And it's correct. You know, we are being bypassed. And I thought, too, it was an affirmation of it is legitimate to have ethnic nationalities. You don't have to be a Tower of Babel in order to be justified. I thought this was very important. He was speaking of the cultural and spiritual health of the Western world. And to see that kind of important point brought out in a national security strategy, I thought was amazing. That's an extremely important development, that we don't have to be some sort of multicultural Tower of Babel in order to be justifiable, and that nationalism is justifiable. In fact, it's the only way you can have a country, because the Tower of Babel is not a country. There are no common interests. There's no way to even have a common law. And we see this in the countries where the population has altered dramatically. There are now large numbers of Muslims. They're imposing Sharia law. And we now see courts being accepted that rule on that basis, even though that's not the basis of the law of the country. So when the document speaks of European civilization being erased. That's exactly what's happening. It's what's happening. It struck me when it said that in 20 years or less, Europe will be unrecognizable. Well, that means the end of NATO. Then how do you have NATO when you don't have a nation? Well, you don't have a unity of nations. You've got a collection of what? Multicultural towers of Babel. These are not countries. So if this process of the Americans going in, bombing countries, driving all the people into the United States, all the people into Europe, all of those countries simply disappear. There won't be any Western world. There won't be any United States. I mean, just look at all of the publicity now coming out about the Somalis in Minnesota. The extraordinary scandals, the corruption, the way they raid federal payment systems and send the money abroad to terrorists. Well, this is all in the news now. Minneapolis, one city, the Biden regime located 80,000 Somalis there. They're essentially taking over. So for this to be unrecognized for so long, and nobody dares mention it because you'll be called a racist or something, or a nationalist today is a Nazi. If you believe in a national government, it means you're a Nazi. See, this is the way they've got the terms. Well, this national security document looks at these problems in a realistic way and acknowledges. So these are far bigger threats to the West than Russia or China or Iran or any of the kind of excuses they create for massive armaments expenditures, from which they rake off all kinds of commissions and all sorts of unaccountability. Anytime you're faced with a threat, you can hide all information simply by saying national security. You don't have to release anything. And the system it doesn't want to give up this extraordinary protection. But if you don't have a threat and you're carrying on illegally or badly, it's hard to say, oh, this is a national security matter. But what is the who's the threat? So getting rid of threats is not convenient for the powerfully established, institutionalized forces that have used this for so many decades. So that's my take on it.
Paul, when you mentioned, the immigrants, those people who are not part of the culture, the dominant culture of a country, going there and they want to somehow make some sort of changes. But after all, look, you mentioned Somalia. Look at Somalia, Libya, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. These countries were destroyed, were robbed. In Syria, before the fall of Assad, who was stealing the oil of Syria and sending them to where?
The United States, of course.
This is the problem, Paul. This is the problem. The root causes of all of these problems that you mentioned is that the people have no conditions in their country to live.
That's what I said. I said we went there and bombed everybody and created floods of refugees. So it's a policy that comes back and destroys yourself. We shouldn't have done that. We did it for Israel. People don't really understand the true cost of the United States serving Israel. And the cost is it's flooded the entirety of the Western world, all of Europe, the United States, Canada, with people who are not assimilated. And they're in such huge numbers they can exist without having to be assimilated. And they come from countries where corruption is the norm. That's what they know. And that's what we see unfolding in Minneapolis. We're seeing these elements who basically milk federal programs, and the money leaves the country in briefcases, cash in briefcases, and goes to tourists abroad. So when a country that brings that on itself and its allies, I mean, it's completely stupid. And who benefited? Israel. And who's paying the cost? All of Europe and the United States. And, oh, you can't say that. That's anti-Semitism. So you can't say the truth. You can't, everyone's afraid to mention it. You can't discuss what's actually going on. Well, if you can't discuss what's actually going on, then you don't know what's going on, and you don't even know what's going to happen to you next. So, you don't need to be making excuses for these refugees needing somewhere to go. But it would have been much better to say you'd have been cheaper and no threat to the nationalities in Europe and the United States, to have kept them there and rebuilt the country you destroyed. The cost of the welfare systems to support all these millions of refugees is huge. It's huge. It'd been cheaper simply to use that money and rebuild the countries, and to use the labor of those people to rebuild the countries, so they'd be paid good wages. That's what should have been done, not just remove all borders and be overrun. But it happened because of the liberal left. The liberal left has been attacking Western civilization for a long time. And essentially, if you go to a university any time since I went there, you just learn the West is evil and it has to be replaced. That's just what the story is. And so all the influx of foreign people is just part of replacing the evil white supremacist, racist, exploitative countries that need to be replaced. So there was no intellectual or ideological opposition to the overrunning of Western countries. And so being no opposition, it never occurred to anybody, why don't we just rebuild their countries that we stupidly and evilly destroyed? That's what should have been done. And it would have been cheaper. You just think about all the bills hard-pressed taxpayers all over Europe and the United States are paying to house people in hotels, to provide medical care, and to give them debit cards with money on it so they can provide for themselves. And it's an endless expense. And the scandals that are now developing.
Paul, do you really believe that liberals are left or leftists? I don't see that. I don't see,
Yeah, they are.
I see a combination of all, right, left, and, liberals are not left and right. They're somehow the center, and they have everything in their hands.
The liberals are...
Left is not in power, Paul. We know that right is not in power as well.
Who's not
None
in power?
of these two. I don't see left has ever been in power in the United States, or right. Even MAGA is not in power right now. I don't see those people who voted for Donald Trump are in power.
Look, many of the liberal professors have written, there was an article not too long ago in Chronicles, that we didn't realize the danger from the left We saw them as just bringing new ideas. And we were interested because we've been doing the same thing for a long time. And we thought having a few new ideas would enrich the place, and we let them in, and we were foolish because they took over and drove us out. I'm certain they totally control the universities, and the left, in terms of the ideas it has successfully propagated, that white people are racist and that Western civilization is evil and bad. This has been institutionalized in teaching for as long as I can remember. I remember when I was at Stanford University, two of my colleagues at the Hoover Institution, Louis Gann and forget that name for the moment. They wrote a book, Burden of Empire, which was an effort to counter the overwhelming argument that everything white people had ever done outside their country was motivated by the worst kinds of intentions and so on and so on. And they said, well, actually, there never was any policy like this, that the empires were in many sense accidents, products of private individuals, private companies like India was taken over by a private company. These were not, and attributing all these policies to some kind of a scheme to oppress dark-skinned people is nonsense. So, and that was around 1970. So we're talking about 55 years ago. They felt they had to come to the defense of the truth about what is the real colonial experience, and of course they were demonized. So it's been like that for a long time.
Paul, how in my opinion, what's going on in the United States? Who's going to benefit from these immigrants? There are cheap labors for the oligarchs in the United States, for the big companies. They're not, Paul. One of the most important, one of the biggest issue of today's US, the situation in the United States and the economy is how did all these jobs were, moved to China. Who did that? It was the left. Do you really think that, do we have any left and right after all? I don't see left and right, Paul. I don't see that, because look at what the situation. You mentioned Israel. There are people, progressives and people MAGA. They're mostly united in the policy of their thinking of in the Middle East. But who cares about these people? That's why I don't see the people, to be left and right, dividing the people. That's going to help any sort of logic in terms of, how to deal with the issues in the United States. We have some sort of military industrial complex in the United States, hand in hand with Wall Street and those oligarchs. They're doing everything, going a military industrial complex, doing the wars outside of the United States. Basically, they're behind each and every war outside of the United States. And those people who are coming into the United States, they're mostly are cheap laborers for the oligarchs. Is that the case? Don't you think that's happening in the United States?
No, that's not the case. The oligarchs don't need, let's see, how many people were let in during Biden's 4 years? Was it 14 million? 14 million people in? The oligarchs have no need for 14 million laborers. What are the... there's been no growth in U.S. manufacturing jobs, and as long as I can remember, and everywhere labor is being discharged. It's hardly even present in agriculture unless it's fruit and vegetables that have to be picked. But now they basically use machines. No, that's a false claim advanced in behalf of watering down the ethnic-based populations. And as for oligarchs, well, these people exist, but they're not united. Each industry has its oligarchs, and in some cases, industries are united behind a policy. In other cases, they're opposed to each other about a policy. And so there's not some oligarch organization calling all these shots. They influence things through their political contributions, and the influence on this senator and that senator and these congressmen and so on, and on the any kind of revolving door situation they can create between their own employment and federal regulatory agencies like Big Pharma. Big Pharma control the Food and Drug Administration, the CDC, the NIH for years. They controlled them totally. And so these regulatory agencies that were supposed to be protecting the public were simply marketing agents for Big Pharma's products. And you see how the Big Pharma's influence goes into the medical schools the same way, and into the medical journals because they finance the research. And so you have to look at it that way. There's not just some oligarch organization calling shots. The offshoring of jobs, this was imposed by Wall Street. And it was because they wanted more profits. And they would tell a manufacturing company, you need to meet the Chinese price. And that was the way of them saying that you've got to get your labor costs down to the Chinese level. And the only way you could do that would be by dismissing your labor force, closing your facilities in the United States, building them in China, and hiring Chinese labor. And at one time, the difference in wages was dramatic. And so it produced enormous profitability. And of course, that pleased the corporate executives as well, because Congress had imposed a limit on how much you could pay an executive and the salary still be considered a business expense. You couldn't pay them more than $1 million unless it was performance related. And then they got amazing bonuses, many multiples of their salaries. And what did it mean, performance-based? It meant that you had raised profits. And so everything started turning on raising profits. So we lost an industrial labor force. We lost the industrial unions that used to provide political balance. And so on. I can go on at length about this. I wrote a book, and there's a lot of it is in the book. So to get back to your point about the left not having any influence and the liberals not being left, you will always find the liberals will align, well, I would say in 90% of the cases, liberals will align with the left against the right, or they will very seldom align with the right. And it was the liberals who misunderstood the intentions of the left, who let them take over education. And so now we have law schools who teach the law students that the Constitution is in the way of progress, and that your function as a lawyer is to use law as a weapon to revolutionize society. This is what they're taught. We have the same thing in journalism schools. They're told your job's not to report objectively. Your job is to create narratives that help the restructuring of life toward a Tower of Babel. So, and this is what they do. I mean, this is why we don't have a media. We have people telling us narratives, and the narrative is always against the West. It's against Western civilization. You see it everywhere, and now it is even apparent in the national security strategy. They recognize that this has been going on, and this is a threat. You know, you can't exist as a country if the enculturation system is teaching you guilt and destroying self-belief. So once the belief is destroyed and you're full of guilt, now how do you have a country? You don't. You don't have one. If you don't have any pride in achievements, and you've lost self-respect because you're a white racist and an explorer, the country's lost. This is an attack that's been going on for decades. And what were the conservatives worried about? Oh, the Soviet threat. It was minuscule compared to the internal threat from the left. And the universities today bear no resemblance to the universities I taught in. I wouldn't go near a university today. There's nothing. I wouldn't even go to give a speech or a lecture. There's nothing could get me anywhere near a university, an American university or a British university. Nothing. They have nothing whatsoever to do with truth or scholarship. I don't think scholarship any longer exists. It's all a narrative in service to an agenda. And the agenda is anti-Western civilization. That's the ruling agenda in the universities of the West. I've written so many articles demonstrating it, showing it, example after example. There's no doubt about it. The best print publication in the United States is the City Journal.
Paul, if that's the case, who's doing this? Who's behind the scene doing this?
It's a consequence of the structure of ideas. It's it's a very long, complicated story. I wouldn't attempt right now on the spur of the moment to try to give it to you, but it's a consequence of the way certain ideas in the Western tradition unfolded. And so it doesn't mean there's some kind of an organized group there controlling it, pushing buttons to it. It works on its own. It's just the consequence. It's the logical consequence of a set of ideas as they unfold. And that's all I can say about it at this time. I haven't lectured on that in a long time. I would have to go and make a preparation and figure out how to explain to people who otherwise wouldn't have any idea what I was talking about. It's quite a piece of intellectual work to do that, and your audience for that is limited. So But if you don't think the West is under attack, there's a lot of things that I don't see how you can explain. Why do we have leftist Democrats in blue states organized to prevent the federal government from deporting illegal aliens? They actually even use violence to prevent this. They pass laws to prevent it. So here you see state and local elected Democrat officials taking the side of people who have illegally entered the United States against the government of the United States. So we have the Democrats lined up with the people who've broken the law, entered illegally, and are fighting for them against the federal government. Well, how does that come about? This is insurrection, and nothing can be done about it. Why? Because of the strength of the liberal left. There's no support in the media for doing anything about it. There's no support among the intellectuals for doing anything about it. Clearly, the Democratic Party won it. Why? Because they have been indoctrinated for a half a century that white people are evil and that racism will exist as long as white people exist. And so you have to replace them. And this is their policy. It's what they're doing and have been doing. And look at the enormous opposition to Trump during his first term, to building a wall. He couldn't even get a wall. He's president of the United States. He can't even get Congress to supply the money to build a wall so that we can have a border. Now, what other country allows this? Does Iran allow all the people from Syria and Iraq and Libya and
Actually, they
Somalia?
did that to Iran, Paul. To be honest,
Does Iran allow them to come in? No.
they did that to Iran, Paul. They did that to Iran. One of this, the Israeli attack on Iran actually was somehow assisted by these immigrants, undocumented immigrants in Iran. They have prepared these people. They made it network in Iran to facilitate what they were trying to do, these terrorist attacks on Iran before, with the 12-day war against Iran. They're doing this everywhere, Paul. And
Well, let's ask a question. Why is Israel so opposed to Iran?
Because the only country that exists in that region, in my opinion, we have two countries, two important countries, by the way. We have Turkey and Iran. Turkey is not that much of a problem for Israel because they try to, negotiate. They try to talk with Israelis when it comes to the case of Gaza and Palestine. But Iran doesn't negotiate. Iran doesn't want, Iran's official policy is to support Palestinians. They're not going to compromise and cooperate on any, they don't want to let Israel to capture, to dominate the region. That's the main point on the part of Iranians, even in Doha. And you see the tone how somehow has changed, Paul. Even Arab state, you've mentioned the Arab, Saudi Arabia is talking about, Qatar is talking about, without Iran. They feel it because they were attacked. When they see Israel after ceasefire, Israel is attacking Lebanon, Syria. Syria is the new, HTS was put in Syria by CIA. And there's, after all, they're attacking Syria. With the case of Gaza, in the case of the West Bank, it's not about Iran, Paul. Israel is trying to somehow manipulate the whole region, and there is no force against what they're doing but Iran. That's the problem with Iran. I don't see any, because for such a long time I was asking myself why there is no good relationship between Iran and the United States. What's the problem? I think the both parties would benefit from any sort of agreement in the Middle East. And the
Well,
only
the
reason
answer
that
to your
comes to
question
my mind
is,
is Israel and nothing more than that.
well, the Israel lobby is far more powerful than Iran. So,
That's correct. Yeah.
you see, the Israelis have no problem acting in their self-interest. You can't make claims about Israelis that you can about Western civilization, because that would be anti-Semitic. But you can say whatever you want about white people, and there's no consequence, that there's no way you can be discredited as a hater or something like that. So it's open season on white people and white civilization, but you can't even criticize Israel for genocide. And so we have these kinds of situations that immobilize Western civilization. You can't even defend, a white person can't even defend himself against some charge, because that proves he's a racist. So when you have what was once the most important part of the world debilitated to the extent can't even defend itself without being called further names, you can see how ideas can undo you even more effectively than military conquest. So, but I don't know exactly how we got into this, but as far as I can tell, in many aspects, liberals are displaced. And if you look at the immigrant invaders who are now serving as Democratic members in Congress and as prosecutors and judges and state and local governments, they're very assertive in any sort of normal situation. They behave outrageously, and yet nothing is done to discipline them. No white person could behave that way in those offices. So we can see that they're quickly gaining power. They're quickly acquiring power. And it's a power that's hostile to the host country. And so it should be recognized. People should be aware. There should be some way of being cognizant that this exists and that it is a threat. And yet it's not remarked. But Trump, in his national security strategy, speaks about the erasure of Western civilization, of Europe, just being erased. And of course, this is what the French novelist Jean Raspail made clear would happen in his 1973 book, The Camp of the Saints. He says, the West is finished. It's gone. It's just a matter of time. And it certainly looks like he was right. But in the meantime, why don't we, and maybe you and Larry exhausted the national security strategy by Trump. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it seems to me to be hopeful if it has any influence, in other words, if it translates into the so-called peace negotiations about Ukraine between Putin and Trump, it implies that Trump will see the attractiveness of Putin's proposals, and that this is the way to end it consistent with Trump's national security strategy. But who knows? As we've said many times, presidents aren't all that powerful, and it takes a movement. And the question is, how committed to this strategy would Trump's government be? That's why I was asking Larry, where did it come from? Well, if you just look at the books that are published, the articles that are written, the curriculums in the universities, you do not find affirmative statements about Western civilization. You just don't find them. They're gone. You find white fragility. And the person who wrote that now has written a book about nice racism that even progressive Democrats are racist, but they try to be nice about it. And so, in other words, there's nothing a white person can do to not be guilty of racism. And this idea has completely taken control of the liberal left. This completely, that's their idea. And everything reflects it. So the effect is to destroy the confidence of white people. And over time, they kind of get demoted. Then they don't have the same protections in law. And look, just the other day, a person, an immigrant invader who had stabbed a guy on a train several times, was arrested for whatever the charge, attempted murder or something, put on trial. And there was no doubt about the evidence, all the video cameras, it was all shown. The stabbed guy had done nothing. He was white. The black guy that had stabbed him, he clearly stabbed him unprovoked. Just another deranged person, like seems to happen continually, day after day, on the trains and subways. And the jury let the guy go because after the white man was stabbed like this, he used the N-word. He called the guy who stabbed him, he used the forbidden N-word. So the fact that he responded after he stabbed with the N-word, the white jury thought that this was unacceptable. And so they found the stabber non-guilty. Now, there you see a form of legal privilege for non-whites being instituted in the criminal justice system. The jury wouldn't convict the black guy because the white guy, after being stabbed, called the black guy a name. Now, this actually happened. This just recently happened. Well, what does that tell you? It tells you we are developing a multi-tiered system of justice There's no longer equality under the law. There is a different justice system based on race, on claimed gender. For example, if a guy claims he's a woman, then the system imposes him on female privacy. He has access to their toilets, to their showers, to their sports teams. If I were to claim I'm a woman, I would have that access. But if I'm a man and don't claim that, I don't have it. So this is not equality under the law. There's an endless number of these. Your rights depend on your declared sexual preference, your declared gender, your race. You can discriminate against white people in university admission, in employment and promotion, but you cannot discriminate against black people on those grounds. You can discriminate against males on those grounds, but not against females on those grounds. So the whole notion of a system of law under which everyone lives equally is being erased. And the law schools are in favor of it and are leading the way. So you reach the point, Nima, where the question is, does Western civilization even exist? Because one of the attributes of Western civilization is equality under the law. And yet, who's erasing it? The white liberal left. It's erased. You can look at every institution that's associated with Western civilization, and it's being erased. None are being built. They're all being erased. Function of the media is not to tell the truth. Indeed, telling the truth can be hurtful. It can be offensive. If you can't tell the truth, how do you have justice? If you can't have justice, what have you got? So this is a very serious thing. It's got nothing to do with oligarchs wanting people to work, having people come in. Because, look, I just read an article today about Jeffries, and he says, I'm a white male, how can I get a job? You have to read it. He goes through, you can't get a job. You can't even get an interview. He said, what is this talk about nobody will work? It's all made up. So they make up things so they don't have to face what the real problem is. So, well, they won't work. White people won't work. So we have to have all these. It's just, but why don't they work? Well, because they can't get a job. You know, they don't enjoy living in their parents' basement when they're 30 years old.
Yeah.
So I think we have to understand that the entire structure of Western civilization is extremely fragile at the present time. And it seems like it's made more fragile every day.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Paul.
Well,
Great
okay,
pleasure
Nick.
as always.
It's your fault. You provoked me.
Yeah, I think we have to understand. We have to talk to each other. Right? After all, it doesn't. We don't have to agree with each other, but we have to understand each other. We have to talk to each other. It's important, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, you perform a very important function, and I look forward to it. I like to be provoked. It makes me think about things that I haven't thought about because I'm thinking about something else.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Paul. See
Thank
you
you,
soon.
Nima. See you
Bye-bye.
soon. Goodbye. Send me the URL.
I'm gonna send it right away. Bye-bye.
Okay. Goodbye, my friend.
Goodbye.